Can you hug me? I'm sorry, kid, the man said quietly, not turning his head at first. I'm not really in the mood to talk today, and I don't want to hug anyone, especially when they're not my family. I just want to be alone for a while. The little girl stood there, holding a white envelope with both hands. It can be just for a little moment, she said softly. Then I'll let you be alone again, I promise. The man sighed and finally turned to look at her. There are a lot of people in this park, he said. Why are you asking me? Why not ask someone else? The girl hesitated, then pointed gently toward a large tree not too far from the bench. Because I saw you earlier, she said. He frowned slightly. Saw me? She nodded. You were standing near the big tree. You were talking to a lady. You weren't talking very loud, but I think you were arguing. She looked down at the envelope, then back at him carefully. I heard the lady say, "You're not the father, William. You don't get to decide anything." William felt the world go very quiet around him. The girl hurried to continue, worried she had done something wrong. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to listen. I wasn't trying to be rude. I was sitting on the bench over there waiting for my mom. She went to buy a small cake to celebrate my scholarship, and she told me to stay where she could see me. I was reading my book, and I just heard it. She paused, then said the next part very gently. But I heard you say you really wanted that baby, and that you already bought shoes and painted the room. William stared at her, unable to speak. She took a small step closer. So I think, maybe you don't get a chance to be a dad right now, she said. And I don't have a dad at all. So I thought, maybe we could help each other. He swallowed hard. Help each other? He repeated quietly. Annie nodded and held the envelope against her chest. I got a scholarship today, she said. A really big one. My teacher said it means I can go to a very good school if I keep studying like this. My mom hugged me this morning when she read the letter. She was so happy she cried a little. Annie smiled at the memory, then her smile faded just a bit. But at school, when the other kids get good news, their moms and dads both hug them. And I was thinking about that all day. She looked up at him, her eyes clear and hopeful, but not demanding. So maybe you could hug me, and I can know what it feels like when a dad hugs you. And maybe when you hug me, you can know what it feels like to have a kid, even if it's just for a moment. William looked away, his jaw tight. A few hours ago, he stood near the park, listening to the woman he loved explain that the child he had begun to love was not his biological child. He had painted the small room at the end of the hallway a soft yellow. He had spent 2 hours choosing a crib even though he knew nothing about cribs. He had stood in a store holding a pair of impossibly small shoes and laughing at himself for being so happy over something so small. Those shoes were still in the trunk of his car. I'm not really the person you think I am, he said quietly. I'm not anyone's dad. Annie shrugged a little. Not yet, she said. He looked at her again. You're very brave. You know that? Talking to a stranger like this. My mom says some strangers are just people you haven't met yet, Annie replied. And she says you can tell a lot about a person by how they look when they think no one is watching. You looked very sad when you were standing near that tree. William let out a breath through his nose. Your mom sounds like a smart woman. She is, Annie said proudly. She works a lot, but she always helps me with homework, even when she's really tired. She says school is my way to a different life. They sat quietly for a few seconds. Annie didn't rush him. She just stood there, holding that letter, waiting. It's just one hug, she said again, very softly. I don't want money. My mom says we don't ask strangers for money. Just the hug. Then I'll say thank you, and you can go back to being alone. William Carter looked at her small hands, at the envelope, at the quiet hope on her face. Slowly, like a man making the most important decision of his life without fully understanding why, he opened his arms. Annie stepped forward immediately and wrapped her arms around him. She hugged him tightly, like she had decided this hug mattered and she wasn't going to waste it. For a moment, William didn't move. Then his arms closed around her, gently but firmly. He could feel how small she was, how easily she trusted him, how naturally she fit into that empty space in his arms. He had dreamed about this feeling. About a child running into his arms. About being called dad. About being needed in that simple, unquestioned way children need their parents. He never thought his first moment like this would be with a little girl who wasn't his, on a cold bench, on the worst week of his life. Annie leaned her cheek against his chest and stayed there for a few quiet seconds. Then she pulled back and looked up at him with a small, satisfied smile. "You see?" she said softly. "See what?" William asked, his voice rough. "That we helped each other," Annie said. "You felt what it's like to have a kid, and I felt what it's like to have a dad." William was still holding Annie when he heard fast footsteps on the gravel path behind him. "William?" The voice was sharp. Annie loosened her arms and leaned back slightly, but William hadn't fully let go yet. He turned his head, and there she was, Elena, standing a few feet away. Her coat unbuttoned, her hair slightly messy like she had been walking fast, maybe even running. For a moment, no one spoke. Elena's eyes moved from William's face to Annie, then to William's arms still around the little girl. Her expression changed from confusion to disbelief. "I leave you alone for a few hours," Elena said slowly, "and I come back and find you hugging a child in the middle of the park." William carefully let Annie go and rested his hands lightly on her shoulders, as if making sure she was steady beside him. Annie looked up at him, then at the woman, sensing immediately that this was not a normal conversation. "Elena," William said, his voice calm but cold. "This isn't a good time." Elena let out a short laugh that had no humor in it. "Oh, I think it is a very good time. I've been calling you all afternoon. You didn't answer, so I came here because I knew this is where you go when you want to pretend the world doesn't exist." Her eyes went back to Annie. "Who is she?" Before William could answer, Annie spoke politely, the way her mother had taught her. "My name is Annie, ma'am," she said. "I got a scholarship today." Elena blinked, clearly not expecting that answer. "A scholarship?" she repeated, then looked at William again. "And you're celebrating scholarships now? Is that what this is?" "This is none of your business," William said quietly. "It stopped being my business?" Elena asked, her voice rising. "That's interesting, because this morning, we were talking about a baby, about our future, about the life we were supposed to have." William's jaw tightened. "No," he said. "This morning you told me you were having a baby with someone else, and that you wanted me to just accept it and still be part of your life like nothing happened." Elena crossed her arms. "I told you I was scared. I told you I made a mistake." "You didn't make a mistake," William said, his voice still controlled but heavier now. "You made a choice." Annie stood very still beside him, holding her envelope against her chest, her eyes moving from one adult to the other. She didn't understand everything, but she understood enough to know this conversation had something to do with why William looked so sad earlier. "Elena," William continued, "you said I'm not the father. You said I don't get to decide anything about that child. Remember?" Elena looked away for a second, then back at him. "That doesn't mean you walk away from us. From me." "Us?" William repeated quietly. "There is no us anymore." Right then, another voice entered the moment. "Annie?" Sarah was walking toward them, holding a small bakery box and a paper bag. She slowed down when she saw Annie standing between two adults who clearly knew each other and were clearly not happy. Her eyes went immediately to Annie first, checking if she was all right. Then she looked at William, then at Elena, reading the situation in silence. "Is everything okay?" Sarah asked, her voice calm but protective. Annie nodded quickly. "I'm okay, Mom," she said. Then she added honestly, "Mr. William was just giving me a hug because I got the scholarship. And then the lady came." Sarah looked at William, waiting for an explanation. Elena looked at Sarah, then at Annie, then back at William. "So this is what you do now?" she said. "You play family with strangers' children in the park?" William's eyes hardened. "You don't get to say that," he said. "And why not?" Elena demanded. "Because you already have a child with someone else," William said, his voice low and steady. "So what right do you have to tell me what I can or cannot be to someone else? You told me this morning that I wasn't the father, that I didn't get a say. Fine. But then you don't get a say in my life anymore either." Elena stared at him like she didn't recognize him. "You don't get to decide when I'm allowed to care about someone," William continued. "You don't get to decide whether I'm allowed to be a father, in whatever way life gives me the chance. You made your choice. This is me making mine. If this moment touched your heart, please like this video and leave a comment telling me where you are watching from. Your support helps this story reach more people who still believe in kindness, second chances, and quiet acts of love. And if you enjoy stories like this, please subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next story." For a long moment, Elena didn't speak. Finally, she shook her head slowly. I don't even know who you are right now, she said. William looked at her, tired but certain. I think this is the first time in a long time that I know exactly who I am. Elena looked at Annie once more, then at Sarah, then back at William. There was anger in her eyes, but also something else. Something like realization. Goodbye, William, she said quietly. Then she turned and walked away. No one spoke for a few seconds. Annie looked up at William. Was that the lady from the tree this morning? She asked softly. William nodded once. Yes. Annie thought about that, then gently slipped her small hand into his. I'm sorry she made you sad, she said. Sarah watched that small movement, her daughter's hand in this man's hand, and something in her expression changed. Annie, Sarah said gently, why don't you show me the scholarship letter again? Annie immediately pulled her hand back and opened the envelope, starting to explain every detail of the letter again, her voice bright and excited. While Annie talked, Sarah looked at William quietly. That looked like a very hard conversation, she said. William nodded slightly. It was something that needed to be said. Sarah glanced down at Annie, who was still talking about classes and books and a library she had seen in the school brochure. Then she looked back at William. Thank you, she said softly. For what? For not making my daughter feel like she did something wrong by asking for a hug, Sarah said. A lot of people would have pushed her away. William looked at Annie, who was now carefully putting the letter back into the envelope like it was made of gold. She didn't do anything wrong, he said. She just asked for something honest. Sarah nodded slowly. Yes, she said. She usually does. Sarah and Annie sat down on the bench while William remained standing for a moment, as if he wasn't sure whether he was supposed to stay or leave. The air had grown colder, and the late afternoon light stretched long shadows across the path. Annie was carefully placing her scholarship letter back into the envelope, smoothing the paper with small, serious hands. My teacher said I should keep it safe, Annie explained, mostly to her mother but loud enough for William to hear. She said this letter can change my life. Sarah smiled and brushed a curl away from Annie's forehead. Then we'll keep it somewhere very safe tonight, she said. Maybe in the folder with your report cards. Annie nodded, satisfied with that plan. Then she looked up at William. Do you think the school will have a big library? She asked. I'm sure it will, William said. Good schools usually do. I like libraries, Annie said. They're quiet, and nobody tells you you're too loud or too slow. Books don't get mad at you. William felt that sentence more than he expected to. Sarah noticed the way his expression changed and said gently, she spent a lot of time waiting in quiet places while I work. Libraries, hospital waiting rooms, break rooms, anywhere they let her sit with a book. Annie looked at her mother quickly. It's okay, Mom. I like reading. I know you do, Sarah said softly, squeezing her hand. There was a short silence, not uncomfortable, but thoughtful. People passed by, some glancing briefly at the well-dressed man standing beside the modestly dressed woman and her daughter, forming a picture that didn't quite fit into one simple story. Mr. William, Annie said suddenly, why did that lady say you don't get to decide anything about the baby? Sarah immediately gave her a look. Annie, that's not our business. It's okay, William said quietly. He sat down on the other end of the bench, leaving a respectful space between himself and Sarah so she wouldn't feel crowded. She said that because the baby she's having isn't mine. Annie frowned, trying to understand. But you wanted the baby, right? William nodded once. Yes, I did. And you bought the little shoes? Annie asked. He looked at her, surprised. You heard that part too? She nodded. I was reading, but you were talking kind of loud at the end. He let out a small breath through his nose. Yeah, he said. I bought the shoes. Then why can't you be the dad? Annie asked. If you wanted to be? Sarah opened her mouth to stop the conversation, but William answered before she could. Because sometimes wanting something very much, he said slowly, doesn't mean you get to have it. Sometimes life lets you plan something, build something, dream about something, and then it takes it away. Annie was quiet for a moment. That's not very fair, she said. No, William agreed. It's not. Annie looked down at her shoes, then back up at him. My mom says life isn't fair, but people can still be fair, she said. She says, that's the important part. Sarah looked a little embarrassed. I talk too much, she said. No, William said. You say the right things. Sarah studied him for a moment, then asked, do you have other family? Parents? Brothers? Sisters? My parents passed away, William said. I have an older sister. She lives in Boston. She has 3 kids. He paused. They call me Uncle Will, but I only see them on holidays. I was always working. Annie tilted her head. Do you like being Uncle Will? I do, he said, but it's not the same as being someone's dad. Annie nodded like she understood that difference very clearly. Sarah looked at the expensive watch on his wrist, then at his face again. You said you own a technology company, she said. That sounds like a very big job. It is, he said, or at least it used to feel like the most important thing in my life. And now? She asked. William looked at Annie, who was now carefully licking blue frosting off her finger so it wouldn't get on the scholarship letter. Now I'm not so sure, he said. Annie looked up again. My mom says the most important job is taking care of people, she said. But it doesn't pay very much. Sarah laughed quietly. That is unfortunately true. What do you do? William asked her. I'm a nurse's assistant, Sarah said. I work at a rehabilitation center at night and sometimes at a clinic during the day. It depends on the week and who needs extra shifts. That's a hard job, William said. It's an honest job, Sarah replied. And it keeps the lights on. Most months. William nodded slowly. You're raising her by yourself? Sarah nodded. Since she was a baby. Annie leaned slightly against her mother's arm but kept looking at William. It's okay, she said. We're a team. I can see that, William said. The sun was starting to drop lower behind the buildings, and the air felt colder. Parents called their children, dog walkers headed toward the exits, and the park slowly began to empty. We should go, Sarah said. I have to drop Annie at my neighbor's apartment before my shift. Annie looked at William. Are you going to be sad again when we leave? She asked. Sarah gave her a look. Annie, it's a real question, Annie said seriously. William thought about it before answering. Maybe a little, he said honestly, but not as much as before. Annie seemed satisfied with that answer. She slid off the bench and stood in front of him. Good, she said, because I don't want you to be the saddest person in the park anymore. That's a very bad title. I'll try to give that title to someone else, William said. Annie nodded, then did something that felt natural now. She held out her hand. He took it, and she squeezed his fingers once, before letting go. Maybe I'll see you tomorrow, she said. Maybe you will, he replied. Sarah adjusted the strap of Annie's backpack and looked at William. We come here most afternoons after school, she said. She does her homework on that bench while I finish work nearby. William nodded. I think I'll be here. Sarah held his gaze for a moment, as if trying to understand what kind of man would choose to come back to the same bench just to see a child he had met only once. Then maybe we'll see you tomorrow, William, she said. They started to walk away, Annie holding her mother's hand, the envelope pressed safely between them. After a few steps, Annie turned around and walked backward for a moment so she could still see him. Mr. William, she called. Yes? She smiled. You're not alone anymore. You know that, right? William Carter stood in the middle of Central Park, surrounded by thousands of people, traffic, buildings, noise, and the entire weight of his old life waiting for him just outside the trees. But as he watched the small girl and her mother walk away together, he realized something had shifted, quietly and permanently. For the first time in a very long time, going back to the park tomorrow felt more important than going back to the office. The next afternoon, William arrived at the park earlier than he meant to. He told himself it was because he needed fresh air, because he couldn't stand another afternoon sitting in his office pretending to care about numbers and projections and meetings that suddenly felt like they belonged to someone else's life. But if he was honest, he knew exactly why he was there. He was there because a 6-year-old girl with a scholarship letter had told him, "You're not alone anymore," and he had believed her. He sat on the same bench, hands in his coat pockets, watching people pass. For the first time in years, he noticed small things: a father teaching his son how to ride a bike, a mother tying her daughter's scarf, an old couple walking slowly, their hands brushing against each other every few steps like they had been doing that for 40 years. He wondered what it would have been like to teach a child how to ride a bike. He wondered what it would have been like to sit at a small kitchen table and help with homework instead of answering emails during dinner. He wondered a lot of things he had trained himself not to wonder anymore. Mr. William, he turned immediately. Annie was running toward him, her backpack bouncing, her hair slightly messy from the wind. Sarah walked behind her at a normal pace, but William could see the small smile on her face as she watched her daughter run. "You came back," Annie said. slightly out of breath when she reached him. I said I might, William replied. That means you came back, Annie said. Like this was a very important distinction. Sarah reached them and gave a small nod. Hi, William. Hi, Sarah. Annie climbed onto the bench and immediately pulled out a folder and a pencil. I have spelling homework, she announced. And reading. And math. But math is rude. Math is rude? William asked. Yes, Annie said firmly. Because it has too many rules and no stories. Sarah laughed quietly. She prefers books, where people learn lessons. I prefer books where people are kind, Annie corrected. William sat beside them, not too close, just close enough to see the page she was working on. What are your spelling words? He asked. Annie turned the notebook toward him. Determination, opportunity, future, responsible, education. She looked up at him. They're big words. They are big words, William agreed. Do you know what determination means? Annie nodded. It means you don't stop even when things are hard. William glanced at Sarah. She was listening, but pretending to look through Annie's backpack. And opportunity? He asked. Annie thought for a moment. My teacher said opportunity is like a door, she said, but you still have to walk through it yourself. William felt something in his chest again. That same quiet pressure he felt yesterday. Your teacher is very smart, he said. My mom says the same thing, Annie replied. She says this scholarship is a door, and I have to be brave enough to walk through it. Sarah looked at her daughter, her eyes soft but tired in a way that comes from years of carrying too much responsibility alone. You must be very proud, William said to her. I am, Sarah said. She earned this. Every page she read, every test she studied for, she earned it herself. Annie continued writing her spelling words very carefully, her tongue slightly sticking out in concentration. After a minute, she looked up at William again. Do you have homework? She asked. William smiled a little. Not the kind you're thinking of. What kind then? Work homework, he said. Meetings, emails, problems. Annie nodded sympathetically. That sounds worse than math. It is worse than math, William agreed. Sarah sat down on the other side of Annie and took off her gloves. You don't have to sit with us, you know, she said to William. I'm sure you have more important places to be. William looked out at the park for a moment before answering. I used to, he said. Now I'm not so sure. Sarah studied him quietly. You really came back just to sit on a bench and watch a 6-year-old do homework? When you say it like that, it sounds a little strange, he admitted. It is a little strange, she said. But not in a bad way. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, Annie working, Sarah occasionally checking her phone, William just watching the world slow down around them. After a while, Annie closed her notebook. All done, she said proudly. Then she looked at William. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why don't you have kids? She asked. Sarah immediately sighed. Annie, it's okay, William said gently. He thought for a moment before answering. I thought I was going to, he said. I planned for it. I bought a house with an extra room. I worked very hard so I could give my kid a good life. He paused, but sometimes plans don't work out the way we think they will. Annie nodded slowly. My mom says sometimes bad things happen so different good things can happen later, she said. Sarah looked at her. I said maybe. She corrected gently. Annie looked back at William. Maybe meeting me is a different good thing, she said. William didn't trust himself to answer right away, so he just nodded. The sky was starting to turn orange behind the buildings, and the air felt colder again. I have to go to work soon, Sarah said, checking the time. I have a neighbor who watches Annie at night. She does her reading there, and then I pick her up in the morning. William looked at Annie. Do you like your school? He asked. I do, she said. But the new school is very far. My teacher said it's a big opportunity. But my mom says, we have to figure out the bus and the money for uniforms and books. Sarah looked slightly embarrassed. We'll figure it out, she said quickly. We always do. William nodded slowly, but he didn't say anything. Not yet. Annie slid off the bench and stood in front of him again, like she had something important to say. Mr. William? Yes? You came back today, she said. That means you kept your promise. I didn't know I made a promise. You did, Annie said. Yesterday, when you said maybe, William smiled slightly. I'll be more careful with my maybes. Annie smiled back, then did something that felt natural now. She opened her arms a little. This one is a see you tomorrow hug, she said. William hesitated only a second this time before leaning forward and hugging her gently. As he stood there, holding that small child who trusted him for no logical reason at all, William Carter realized something that surprised him. All the money he had ever made, all the buildings with his company's name on them, all the deals and awards and articles, none of them had ever made him feel as needed as a little girl with spelling homework and big words like determination and future. And for the first time in his life, being needed felt more important than being successful. The next week, William Carter began to build a new routine without ever officially deciding to. He still went to the office in the mornings. He still sat at the head of long glass tables and listened to reports about market trends, software development timelines, and expansion plans. He still wore the same tailored suits, the same polished shoes, the same expression that had made people describe him as focused, sharp, and difficult to read. But now, every afternoon, he looked at the clock. At 3:30, he stopped whatever he was doing, no matter who was talking. At 3:45, he was in the elevator. At 4:10, he was walking through Central Park, past the same trees, past the same hot dog stand, toward the same bench. And every time, Annie was there. Sometimes she was reading. Sometimes she was doing math with a very serious, slightly angry face. Sometimes she was drawing pictures and coloring the sky purple because, as she explained, blue is a little boring if you use it every day. Sarah usually arrived a little later, sometimes still in her work uniform, sometimes carrying a grocery bag, sometimes looking so tired that William wondered how she was still standing. One cold afternoon, Annie was struggling with a math worksheet, her eraser leaving gray smudges all over the paper. "I hate fractions," she announced. "Fractions are important," Sarah said, sitting down and rubbing her eyes. "They are rude," Annie replied. "Why can't numbers just be whole?" William sat down beside them and looked at the paper. "What's the problem?" he asked. Annie pushed the worksheet toward him. "This one," she said. 3/4 plus 1/4. I know it's something over 4, but I don't know why. William picked up the pencil. "Imagine you have a chocolate bar," he said, "and it's broken into 4 pieces. Annie was immediately interested. "Okay, if you eat 3 pieces, he continued, drawing a rectangle and dividing it into 4 parts. "That's 3/4. "Then if you eat 1 more piece?" "I ate the whole thing," Annie said. "Exactly," William said. "So 3/4 plus 1/4 equals 4/4, which is 1 whole chocolate bar." Annie's eyes widened. "Math is less rude when it's about chocolate," she said. Sarah laughed quietly, watching them. There was something strange and gentle about seeing a man in a $1,000 coat explaining fractions with drawings of chocolate bars on a child's homework sheet. "You're good at that," she said to William. "At math?" he asked. "At talking to kids," she replied. William looked at Annie, who was now trying to draw her own chocolate bar fractions. "I never really had the chance before," he said. Sarah studied him for a moment. "Why do you keep coming back?" she asked, not suspicious, just curious. "You're a busy man. You could be anywhere after work." William thought about the question. He could have given an easy answer. He could have said he liked the fresh air, or that he enjoyed helping with homework, or that he had nothing better to do. But he had learned something from Annie. She asked honest questions, and she expected honest answers. "Because when I sit here," he said slowly, "I don't feel like the loneliest man in New York anymore." Sarah didn't say anything right away. She just looked down at her hands, then at Annie, then back at William. "That's a very honest answer," she said quietly. Annie looked up from her paper. "You were the loneliest man in New York?" she asked. "I think so," William said. "At least in my building." "Do you live in a big building?" she asked. "Yes." "With a doorman?" "Yes." "With an elevator?" "Yes." Annie nodded like she had expected all of those answers. "Big buildings can be very lonely," she said. "Lots of people, but nobody knows you." William looked at her, surprised again. "That's exactly right," he said. Sarah checked the time and sighed. "I have to go in 20 minutes, she said. "They called this morning. Someone is sick, so I have to cover part of the night shift too." "You worked last night," Annie said. "I know," Sarah replied gently. "Sometimes that's how it is." William watched that exchange carefully, the way Annie didn't complain. The way Sarah didn't pretend everything was easy. The way they spoke to each other like teammates instead of like parent and child. "Do you always work this much?" he asked. Sarah gave a small shrug. "Since Annie was born," she said, "rent doesn't pay itself. And now with the new school." She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. "The scholarship doesn't cover everything," William said. "No," Sarah said, "it covers tuition. Not uniforms, not books, not transportation, not after-school care." She quickly added, "But we'll figure it out. We always do." Annie looked between them. "I can take the bus," she said. "And I don't need new clothes. And I can read in the library after school until Mom finishes work." William felt that familiar pressure in his chest again, the one that felt like both pain and admiration at the same time. "You're 6, he said gently. "You shouldn't have to solve adult problems." Annie shrugged. "We're a team," she said again. "Teams solve problems together." Sarah looked at her daughter with a mixture of pride and sadness that William recognized immediately. It was the look of a parent who wished the world had been softer so their child didn't have to grow up so fast. The sky was turning darker, and the park lights flickered on one by one. Sarah stood up and helped Annie pack her books. "We have to go," she said. "Mrs. Chen will be waiting." Annie put on her backpack, then turned to William. "Will you come tomorrow?" she asked. William nodded. "Yes, I will." Annie seemed relieved, like that answer mattered more than he understood. She stepped forward and hugged him again. Quick, but tight. "This is a good luck with not being lonely hug," she said. William smiled into her hair. "Thank you. I think I need that one." Sarah watched them for a moment, then said quietly, "You know she's going to get used to you being here." William looked at her. "I know," he said. "And kids," Sarah continued gently, "they don't get used to people unless they're afraid those people might leave." William held Annie for one more second before letting go. Then he looked at Sarah, and there was something different in his eyes now, not just sadness, not just kindness, but something more like a decision that hadn't fully formed yet. "I'm not planning to disappear," he said. Sarah nodded slowly. "Then you should be very careful," she said. "Because to a child, someone who stays becomes family." The next day, it rained. Not a heavy storm, just the kind of steady gray rain that made the city look softer and older, like everything had slowed down a little. Most people avoided the park on days like that, but William still went. He stood under the edge of a large oak tree near their usual bench, holding a black umbrella, wondering if Annie and Sarah would come at all in this weather. He told himself they probably wouldn't. A child with homework and a mother who worked night shifts would be smarter than sitting in a wet park. But at 4:18, he saw a small figure in a yellow raincoat running along the path, a backpack bouncing behind her. "Annie." She ran straight toward him like she had known exactly where he would be. "You came," she said, slightly out of breath, raindrops on her hood. "You came too," William replied. She pointed at the umbrella. "You're prepared. That's very responsible." "I've been told that before," he said. Sarah walked up a few seconds later, holding a smaller umbrella that didn't quite cover both her and Annie. Her hair was slightly wet around the edges, and she looked more tired than usual. "You didn't have to come in the rain," William said. Sarah gave a small shrug. "Homework doesn't stop because of rain, and neither does life." Annie slid onto the bench, pulling her notebook out of her backpack and trying to keep it dry. William moved the umbrella so it covered most of the bench. "Today I have reading," Annie announced. "And I have to write a paragraph about what I want to be when I grow up." "That's an important question," William said. "Do you know the answer?" Annie nodded. "Yes. I want to be the kind of person who helps people when they're having the worst day of their life." William felt that sentence land somewhere deep inside him. "That's a very specific career," he said. "My mom says the world needs more people like that," Annie replied. "She says there are a lot of people having bad days, and not enough people noticing." Sarah looked at her daughter, then at William. "I might have said something like that," she admitted. Annie opened her notebook and began writing slowly, sounding out the words under her breath. After a minute, she looked up at William again. "What did you want to be when you were a kid?" she asked. William thought about it. "I wanted to build things," he said. "Not just buildings. I wanted to build something that mattered. Something that would still be there after I was gone." "Like a school?" Annie asked. "Something like that," he said. "Did you build it?" she asked. Yes, he said. I built a company. It's very big now. There are hundreds of people who work there. Annie seemed impressed, but only for a second. Do they like you? She asked. The question caught him off guard. I think they respect me, he said. That's not the same, Annie replied, then went back to writing. Sarah covered her mouth with her hand, trying not to laugh. She asks dangerous questions, she said. I'm starting to notice that, William replied. The rain continued to fall softly around them, tapping against the umbrella in a steady rhythm. After a few minutes, Sarah said quietly, The new school called today. Annie looked up immediately. Am I in trouble? No, Sarah said quickly. You're not in trouble. They just wanted to confirm you'll be starting next month. Annie's face lit up. Next month? Sarah nodded, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Next month. William noticed that. That's good news, he said. Isn't it? It is, Sarah said. Then she hesitated before continuing. It's across town. 2 buses. Maybe a train. I'm still trying to figure out how she'll get there. And back. While I'm working. I can take the bus. Annie said quickly. I told you. Mom. I'm not a baby. You're 6, Sarah said gently. You are a baby. I'm 6.5, Annie corrected. William looked at the notebook in Annie's lap, at the careful handwriting, at the words she had written so far. When I grow up, I want to help people on their bad days because sometimes one nice thing can change everything. He looked at Sarah. She looked exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with sleep and everything to do with responsibility. You shouldn't have to solve all of this by yourself, he said quietly. Sarah's expression changed immediately, a wall going up behind her eyes. We're not asking you to solve it, she said. I know, he said. I'm offering. We don't take money from people, Sarah said, not angry, just firm. I don't want Annie to grow up thinking we needed someone rich to save us. William nodded slowly. What if it's not about saving you? He asked. What if it's about showing up? Sarah didn't answer right away. Annie looked between them. What does that mean? She asked. It means, William said carefully, choosing every word. Sometimes helping someone isn't about giving them money. Sometimes it's about giving them time, or a ride, or help with homework, or just not letting them do everything alone. Annie thought about that. Like a team, she said. Yes, William said. Like a team. Sarah looked at him for a long moment, trying to decide whether to trust what she was hearing. Why would you want to be on our team? She asked quietly. William didn't look away this time. Because I think I need a team too, he said. The rain started to come down a little harder, and Annie moved closer to her mother so all 3 of them could fit under the umbrella. Mom, Annie said softly, still looking at her notebook. I wrote something else. What did you write? Sarah asked. Annie read slowly from the page. Sometimes people who are not your family can become your family if they don't leave. The 3 of them sat there in the rain, under one umbrella, reading a 6-year-old's handwriting like it was something important. After a moment, Sarah spoke. Her voice very quiet. William, if you keep coming back here, she's going to start believing you're not going anywhere. William looked at Annie, then back at Sarah. I know, he said. And if one day you get busy again, Sarah continued, or your life pulls you somewhere else, or you decide this was just something you did for a while, it will break her heart. William felt the weight of that truth settle on his shoulders. I'm not a man who starts things and then walks away, he said. Sarah held his gaze for a long time, measuring that sentence, testing it against everything she had learned about people in her life. Then don't make promises you can't keep, she said quietly. William nodded once. I won't, he said. Annie looked up at both of them, sensing the seriousness but not fully understanding it. Then she closed her notebook and smiled. Good, she said. Because teams are supposed to stay together. The rain stopped the next day, but the air still smelled like wet pavement and cold wind. William arrived at the park a little later than usual because a meeting had run long, and for the first time since he had started coming, he was worried Annie might already be gone. He walked faster than usual along the path, past the benches, past the hot dog stand, scanning for a small yellow or blue coat. Then he saw her. Annie was sitting on the bench, but she wasn't doing homework. Her backpack was beside her, unopened, and she was just sitting there, swinging her legs slightly, like she was waiting for something. When she saw him, she jumped off the bench, and ran toward him. "You're late," she said, not accusing, just stating a fact. "I know," William said. "I'm sorry. I had a meeting that wouldn't end." Annie studied his face for a moment, like she was deciding whether that was a good enough reason. Then she nodded. "Okay," she said. "You're here now. That's what matters." He let out a small breath. "Where's your mom?" "She had to work early today," Annie said. "Mrs. Chen said I could wait here and do my homework, and Mom will pick me up later." William looked around the park, suddenly more aware of how big it was, how many people he didn't know, how small Annie looked sitting there alone. "You've been here by yourself?" he asked. Annie nodded. "I come here a lot. I know which people are nice and which people to stay away from. My mom taught me." William didn't like the idea of a 6-year-old needing to know that. They walked back to the bench together, and Annie finally opened her backpack and pulled out her reading book. "Today I have to read a story about a girl who moves to a new school," she said. "She's scared because she doesn't know anyone." "That makes sense," William said. "New places can be scary." Annie opened the book but didn't start reading right away. "Mr. William," she said, "can I ask you a serious question?" "You always ask serious questions," he said. She nodded. "This one is very serious." "Okay," he said. "I'm ready." She looked down at her book, then back up at him. "Are you going to disappear one day?" The question was so direct that it felt like someone had knocked the air out of his chest. "Why would you ask that?" he said quietly. Annie shrugged a little, but her eyes stayed on his face. "Because good things don't usually stay," she said. "My mom says we should be grateful when good things happen, but we shouldn't hold them too tight, because sometimes they have to go." William sat down slowly on the bench beside her. "Is that what you think I am?" he asked. "A good thing that's going to go away?" Annie didn't answer right away. She traced the corner of her book with her finger. "I don't know yet," she said. "That's why I'm asking." William looked out at the park, at the people walking past, at the city moving like it always did, fast and busy and not noticing small conversations on park benches. "When I was a kid," he said slowly, "my father used to tell me something. He said, a man is not measured by how much money he makes. He's measured by how many people he doesn't walk away from." Annie listened very carefully. "I didn't understand that when I was younger," William continued. "I thought being successful meant building big things and making a lot of money and being important, and I did all of that. But somewhere along the way, I became a man who was very busy and very important and very alone." Annie looked at him. "But you're not alone now," she said. "No," he said, "I'm not." She thought about that, then asked the question again, softer this time. "So, are you going to disappear?" William turned to look at her fully. "No," he said. "I'm not planning to disappear." Annie watched his face very carefully, like she was checking if that answer was true or just something adults say to make kids feel better. "Okay," she said after a moment. "Then I believe you." The simplicity of that "then I believe you" felt heavier than any contract William had ever signed. Annie opened her reading book. "Can you listen to me read?" she asked. "I'd like that," he said. She started reading out loud, slowly and carefully, sounding out the harder words, going back when she made a mistake, determined to get every sentence right. William listened, not just to the story, but to the way she tried, the way she didn't give up when a word was difficult. Halfway through the story, she stopped and looked up at him. "Mr. William?" "Yes?" "When I go to the new school next month, it's very far," she said. "And I might not be able to come to the park every day anymore." The words hit him harder than he expected. "Oh," he said quietly, "I see. But I still want to see you," Annie said quickly. "Because you're on my team. And teams are supposed to stay together, even when things change." William felt something in his chest shift again, that same feeling he had been getting more and more lately. Like his life was slowly being rearranged without anyone asking his permission. "Then we'll figure something out," he said. Annie smiled, relieved. "Okay," she said, "because I don't want you to become the loneliest man in New York again. That would be very bad." William smiled slightly. "I agree. That would be very bad." They sat together on the bench as Annie continued reading. The city moving around them. The future slowly, quietly, walking toward them both whether they were ready or not. The next few days passed in a rhythm none of them talked about, but all of them began to rely on. William worked in the mornings, but his afternoons belonged to the park now. Annie did her homework on the bench, and Sarah arrived when she could. Sometimes with groceries, sometimes in her work uniform, sometimes so tired she closed her eyes for a few minutes while Annie read out loud to both of them. One afternoon, Annie was quieter than usual. She wasn't reading, she wasn't doing math. She was drawing, pressing her pencil very carefully onto a piece of paper, erasing, then drawing again. "What are you working on?" William asked. Annie quickly covered the paper with her arm. "Not finished yet," she said. "You're not allowed to see until it's finished." "That sounds serious," he said. "It is," Annie replied. Sarah arrived a few minutes later, carrying a small grocery bag and looking more tired than William had ever seen her. "Long day?" he asked. She let out a small laugh. "Long week," she said. "One of the nurses quit, so everyone else is covering extra shifts. I think I've had about 10 hours of sleep in the last 3 days." Annie looked up immediately. "Mom, you said sleep is important for your brain." "It is," Sarah said, sitting down slowly, "but sometimes paying rent is also important for your brain." William watched the way she pressed her fingers into her eyes, like she was trying to push the exhaustion back inside her head so her daughter wouldn't see it. "The new school sent another email," Sarah said after a moment. Annie looked up. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," Sarah said quickly. "You didn't do anything wrong. They just sent the list of things we have to buy before the first day. Uniforms, books, activity fees." Her voice trailed off. "Is it a lot?" Annie asked quietly. Sarah smiled, but it was the kind of smile adults use when they don't want children to worry. "It's manageable," she said. "I just need to pick up a few more shifts." William didn't say anything right away. He had learned that Sarah did not like feeling like a charity case. She had pride, and not the loud kind, the quiet kind that kept people standing even when they were exhausted. Annie went back to her drawing, coloring very carefully now. After a few minutes, she looked up at William. "Mr. William, what's a uniform?" she asked. "It's clothes everyone wears so all the students look the same," he said. "Why would they want everyone to look the same?" Annie asked. "So no one feels poor and no one feels rich," William said. Annie thought about that. "That's a good idea," she said. "Then people can only be different on the inside." Sarah looked at her daughter, then at William. "She says things like that and then asks me why we can't afford orange juice this week," she said softly. William leaned back slightly on the bench, watching Annie color. "What are you drawing?" he asked again. Annie hesitated, then slowly turned the paper around. It was a picture drawn with colored pencils. 3 people standing under a big tree. A small girl in the middle, holding hands with a woman on one side, and a tall man on the other. Above them was a badly spelled but very careful sentence. "My team." William felt his throat tighten. Annie pointed at the drawing. "That's me," she said. Then she pointed at the woman. "That's my mom." Then she pointed at the tall stick figure in a long coat. "And that's you, because you said you're on our team." Sarah looked at the drawing and didn't say anything for a few seconds. She just stared at the paper, her eyes moving slowly over the 3 figures holding hands. "Annie," she said quietly. "It's okay, Mom," Annie said quickly. "Teams can have more than 2 people. My teacher said teams are the people who help you win." Sarah swallowed and nodded slowly. "Yes," she said. "That's true." Annie handed the drawing to William. "You can keep it," she said. "So you don't forget you're on our team." William took the paper very carefully, like it was something fragile and important. "I won't forget," he said. They sat there quietly for a while after that, the drawing resting in William's hands. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said finally. "Of course," William replied. "Why Annie?" she asked. "You could donate money to 100 kids. You could start a scholarship fund. You could help from a distance. Why sit on a cold bench every day helping one little girl with spelling words?" William looked down at the drawing again before answering. "Because she didn't ask me for money," he said. "She asked me for a hug." Sarah looked at him, waiting. "And because," he continued, "the day I met her was the worst day of my life, and she walked up to me, a complete stranger, and tried to fix it with a hug, and a scholarship letter, and a rule about how you're supposed to celebrate good news." He paused. "No one has ever done something like that for me before." Sarah's eyes softened, but there was still worry in them. "She's getting attached to you," she said quietly. "I know," he said. "And I think you're getting attached to her too," Sarah added. William didn't deny it. "Yes," he said. Sarah nodded slowly, like she appreciated the honesty, even if it scared her. "Then we have to be careful," she said. Because when a child starts to see you as part of their world, and then you disappear, it doesn't just make them sad. It changes how they see people. It teaches them that everyone leaves. William folded Annie's drawing carefully and put it inside the inner pocket of his coat, close to his chest. I told you before, he said quietly. I'm not planning to leave. Sarah looked at him for a long moment, trying to see if that sentence was a promise or just a hope. Good, Annie said, swinging her legs under the bench. Because I already drew you in the picture. And drawing is kind of like a contract. A few days later, William did something he had not done in years. He left the office in the middle of a meeting. Someone was talking about a merger. Someone else was talking about market risk. Numbers were projected on a large screen, and everyone in the room was waiting for William to say something, because William Carter was always the one who made the final decision. But William was looking at his phone. Uch, kurkiki peme. He remembered Annie saying, "You're late," and the way she had tried not to sound disappointed. He remembered the drawing in his coat pocket that he had taken out and looked at more than once that week. 3 stick figures under a tree. My team, William, one of the board members said. We need your decision on this. William looked up slowly. For the first time in a long time, the numbers on the screen looked small, unimportant, replaceable. I want to postpone this meeting, he said. The room went silent. Postpone? Another executive repeated. We have investors waiting for this decision. Then they can wait one more day, William said calmly. He closed his folder, stood up, and put on his coat. Is everything all right? Someone asked. William thought about that question for a second. Then he nodded. Yes, he said. I think it is. He left the building, ignoring the surprised looks, the whispers, the messages already starting to vibrate on his phone. At 4:16, he walked into the park. Annie was on the bench, but this time she wasn't doing homework. She was sitting very still, her hands folded in her lap, her backpack beside her. When she saw him, she didn't run this time. She just smiled, like she had been waiting and was relieved he had come. You're almost late, she said. Almost, he agreed, sitting down beside her. What are you doing today? No homework? Annie shook her head. I finished it at school, she said. Then she looked down at her shoes. I wanted to talk to you. William felt a small knot form in his chest. That sounds serious. It is, Annie said. He waited. She took a deep breath, like she had practiced what she was about to say. At my new school, she said, there are going to be a lot of kids with dads. Like, dads who pick them up from school, and go to meetings, and sit in the audience, when there are shows. William listened without interrupting, and I was thinking, Annie continued, I don't feel as bad about that anymore, because when I want to tell someone something, I can tell you, and when I have homework, you help me. And when I got the scholarship, you hugged me. She paused, then looked up at him, her eyes very serious for a 6-year-old. So I wanted to ask you something important, she said. But you have to tell me the truth, not the adult truth. The real truth. William nodded slowly. Okay. Annie took another breath. If I was your kid, would you be proud of me? The question hit him harder than anything she had ever asked. He thought about the scholarship letter, the spelling words, the way she broke her cupcake in half to share, the way she worried about her mother, the way she asked him if he was going to disappear. He felt his throat tighten. Yes, he said quietly. I would be very proud of you. Annie searched his face, making sure he meant it. Then she nodded once, like she was accepting something very important. Okay, she said. Then that's enough. Enough for what? He asked. Enough for me to not feel like I don't have a dad, she said simply. Because I think, maybe I just don't have a dad that lives in my house. But I have a dad on my team. William looked away for a second, blinking slowly, trying to keep his composure in front of a 6-year-old who was changing his life without even knowing it. Just then, Sarah walked toward them, but this time her expression was different. She wasn't just tired. She looked worried. Mom? Annie said immediately. What's wrong? Sarah sat down on the bench and tried to smile. But it didn't quite work. I got a call today, she said. From your new school. Am I in trouble? Annie asked again. No, baby, Sarah said quickly. You're not in trouble. But they said there are some additional fees, and uniforms have to be bought from a specific store. And there's a transportation form that has to be submitted this week, or they might give the spot to another student on the waiting list. Annie went very quiet. How much is it? William asked gently. Sarah hesitated. It's a lot, she admitted. More than I expected all at once. We can use my saved money, Annie said quickly. The jar. Sarah looked at her and smiled sadly. Your jar has $32 and some coins, she said softly. Annie looked down. Oh, there was a long silence. Then Annie looked up at William, not asking, not begging, just looking at him like she was thinking. Mr. William, she said slowly. Remember when you said helping is not always about money? Sometimes it's about time, or rides, or not letting someone do everything alone. I remember, he said. Annie nodded. Okay, she said. I just wanted to remind you, in case you forgot. Sarah closed her eyes for a second, like that sentence was both beautiful and painful at the same time. William looked at Annie, then at Sarah, then at the path in front of them. He could solve this problem with one phone call, one transfer, one check. It would be nothing to him, but he knew this wasn't just about money. This was about pride, about dignity, about not making Sarah feel small in front of her daughter. So he chose his words very carefully. What if, he said slowly, I help in a way that doesn't feel like charity? Sarah looked at him, cautious but listening. What if I become part of the team for real? He said. Teams help each other. Not because one is rich and one is poor, but because that's what teams do. Annie looked between them, waiting. Sarah's voice was very quiet when she spoke. And what would that mean? She asked. William took a breath. It means, he said, you don't have to solve everything alone anymore. Sarah did not answer immediately after William said, it means you don't have to solve everything alone anymore. She looked down at her hands, then at Annie, then back at William. There was no anger in her face, no offense. But there was something much more difficult to deal with. Pride mixed with fear. I have been solving things alone for a very long time, she said quietly. Long enough that I don't really know how to do it any other way. William nodded. I understand that, he said. But doing everything alone just because you're used to it, that's not the same as it being the only way. Annie looked between them, very quiet, sensing this was one of those adult conversations that could change things. I don't want Annie to think we needed someone to rescue us, Sarah continued. I don't ever want her to feel like we survived because a rich man felt sorry for us. William shook his head slightly. That's not what this is, he said. And I don't feel sorry for you. I respect you. He paused, making sure she was really listening. There's a difference. Sarah held his gaze, searching his face for anything that sounded like pity. She didn't find it. What exactly are you offering? She asked carefully. William thought for a moment before answering, choosing each word like it mattered, because it did. I'm offering to help Annie get to school in the mornings, he said. It's on my way to the office if I change my route a little. I can pick her up, take her to school, make sure she gets there safe. That doesn't cost you anything. And it doesn't turn you into a charity case. It just means she has a ride. Sarah didn't speak. I can also help with homework in the afternoons, he continued. I'm already here most days. And if there are school meetings during the day and you're working, I can go. Not instead of you. Just so there's someone there from the team. Annie's eyes were wide now, moving back.